Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr. This is episode 366 of CryptoBiography, and it's part 4 of the Orb Warmer. And here we go. But it turned out Melissa did remember, and did take her. Days off were hard to come by normally, but on Wednesday, after her second orb warming, her manager tapped her on the shoulder and told her she had a guest. This, of course, never happened. But Susan had a good idea of who it was. Not as good as she thought, though. When she got out to the lobby, the taciturn driver was there. Of course, Susan thought, Melissa-centered chauffeur. She was driven off, this time out to the country, presumably to the crops that Melissa would be working on. It took the better part of an hour, but they finally arrived. The driver got out and let Susan out, and then led her to a sort of ranch house. Melissa was inside. "Hey, Susan, glad you're here. Time to do some magic." She started off, then seemed to catch herself. She turned back to Susan. "Are you ready?" she asked. "Sure," Susan said. "Then let's go," Melissa replied and hustled off again. They walked out back. "I saved this field for you, so we wouldn't have to get driven way out. It got harvested last night, and I started the shoots." She waved her arm dramatically, and Susan looked out at the field. It had budding plants poking out of the soil at regular intervals. What they were, she couldn't tell. "What are you growing?" she asked. "You'll see," Melissa replied. There was a triangle hanging from a post by a thin metal rod. She took the beater and rang it 3 times. She waited expectantly, so Susan didn't bother to ask what the triangle was for. Soon a man pulled a large wagon out. On it was stack upon stack of orbs, already warmed by Susan's parents or their co-workers. Susan did a bit of quick math, seeing how many were on the top row and how many rows there were, and figured there were over 500 orbs on the wagon. The man helped take the protective top off so that Melissa could get at the top layer of orbs. Susan thought it was interesting to get to see the process, and with a fresh wagon of orbs, she was wondering how many orbs out of the wagon full it would take. 4 or 5? More? Melissa took out an orb and held it up. "Make sure not to touch me, even by accident, when I'm casting," she said. "Magic that gets broken by distraction can go badly wrong." "Okay," Susan said, taking a step back so she was out of arm's reach. Melissa focused on the orb, which was already glowing, but now changed color and brightened to a teal color. The color then spread out over the near part of the field and seemed to sink or seep into the soil. Melissa grabbed another orb from the wagon. The man had brought another wagon, this one designed for Melissa to deposit the emptied orbs. There was now 1 orb in that wagon, and she held up the second orb. More teal light spilled out and covered a different part of the field. Melissa did this over and over. It took not just a few orbs, but orb after orb after orb. When the field was complete, which Susan could only tell because Melissa stopped her casting, more than half the wagon was used up. Somewhere between 20 and 30 people's output, Susan thought, for one field, for one day. Perhaps it was worthwhile, though. The plants, which were corn, were already nearly a foot high and were visibly growing. They'll keep growing like that until tonight. Then tomorrow I'll cast another spell on the same corn to make the ears more plentiful. Then on the next day they'll be harvested. "Wow," Susan said. "I knew that the magic made the plants more bountiful, but I had no idea." "Not a lot of people do," Melissa said with a shrug. Susan just looked out of the field for a long time. Melissa let her, apparently thinking that Susan was impressed. And she was, but she didn't know that Susan was also horrified. All that work her parents did, and it got used in a moment during a spell. No wonder no one could get paid well for orb warming, she thought. The magic allowed crops to grow faster, allowing the current population to survive, but it took so many orbs to do one field that it was too inefficient to allow anyone to do anything else. That made society stuck. There were too many people to feed everyone if they went back to traditional farming, and not enough efficiencies with this magic to allow anyone time to do anything else. But with so many orbs needed, Susan had to wonder why her parents' pay was so low. And if magic took this many orbs, what about the sages who used the orbs she made? Wouldn't that have high usage as well? Shouldn't the demand make the orbs more valuable? But everyone needed the lights and the food and everything else that the magic provided. Before she could really think it through, Melissa broke in. How about some food? They had a wonderful meal together. It was all kinds of sandwiches, fruits, vegetables, and more, and all of the highest quality. Susan found herself eating much more than she usually did, or even could. So, what do you do for fun? Melissa asked Susan when they were full. Susan thought. She used to have a number of hobbies when she was a child, but they dwindled in her adulthood. Now it was just her writing. I write. Fiction, she clarified. Would I have read some of it? Melissa said. Apparently thinking to see if she'd remembered seeing Susan's name on a book. Oh, I haven't published. I haven't even tried, Susan said. Why not? Melissa asked. Susan suspected she would have added, is it not any good? But had decided to be polite. Well, I don't know anyone in publishing, Susan said. Melissa shrugged. True, but if it stands out, that wouldn't matter. I just haven't put it out anywhere. No one else has even read my stuff. Really? No one? Do you write a lot? I do, Susan said. Why do you ask? Well, Melissa said, choosing her words, if I spent a lot of time on something, I'd like someone else to know about it. I mean, I get it if you don't want to publish, Emily Dickinson and all that, but if it's just you reading it, then I guess I don't understand the reasoning. Stories are to be told from person to person. Susan said and stopped. She wasn't sure what to say. She'd always just been so tired at the end of her work days, usually, that forcing herself to write felt like the only thing that made sense, that accomplished anything at all. Whether someone read it or not was immaterial to that. But she wasn't sure if she wanted to tell Melissa all of that or how it would sound. So she thought some more and then said, You know what? I probably should have someone read it. Great, Melissa said. Can that someone be me? And that's the end of the story for this week. I hope you're enjoying it. If you have any questions or comments about this episode or previous episodes, CryptoBiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Facebook or Mastodon or Twitter or X. And thanks for listening. Words of music, copyright 2024, Brandon Starr, all rights reserved. Characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical.